Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about Nicholas Sayre and the Creature in the Case by Garth Nix. I need like an actual bell to do that bit. Just the jingle gnomes in the corner.
Yeah, Gothmog doesn't wear a collar with a bell, but if she did, we could like record that. But
also, this is for, although it is an Old Kingdom book without any Old Kingdom or bells, we're in the right universe for that. You know, having little bells would be.
We are
extremely apropos.
Yeah, we're back in. Well, I was gonna say we're not back in the Old Kingdom, but we are back in that world, the Old Kingdom series.
We're back in their less fun next door neighbour.
Yeah, the less fun next door neighbour. Shall I give the introduction to the book? Because I think the book blurb kind of does explain the vague background you need for this.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, I think we need to at some point sit down and decide if it's funnier to do the terrible summary before or after the actual blurb.
I feel after because it gives context. But that's just me.
That.
I'm leaning the other way around. But you go. Okay. You go for now. We will make management decisions another time.
Nicholas Sayre is still recuperating from the injuries he received at the hands of the Destroyer, but after several idle months in Ancestor Lair, he is desperate to return to the Old Kingdom. So when the opportunity arrives to actually do something, he accepts. As a favour to his uncle Edward, the chief minister of Ancestor Lair, he travels to spend the weekend in a remote country house, the home of a family which would make a good political alliance. That seems easy enough, till he discovers that the house holds many secrets, and the worst of them is a relic of the Old Kingdom, too far from the wall for any spark of its magical life to reignite, unless someone finds a way to unleash its power. ...
That's such a misleading blurb because that's not at all what the setup is. It's not about a political alliance. It's not about him doing a favour to his uncle. His uncle kind of frames it as him doing a favour to Nick.
Yeah, like go to answer some totally safe questions about your extremely traumatic experience with this wizard orb of unknowable power, and then maybe I'll give you a passport so you can literally go somewhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's I mean, it is. I don't think his uncle is, assumes that the questions that they're going to ask turn out to be extremely dangerous, or that actually that might be a pretext for some other nefarious purposes. But basically, Nick would like a passport so he can go to the Old Kingdom and learn why he's so f***ed up now, please. And his uncle's like, well, I can guess, but only if you do this real quick thing for me, real quick. And then it turns out that they're at the place of the thing. There is a monster in the basement.
Yeah,
I quite like the setup of this. I did have to remind myself what happened at the end of Abhorsen, where basically Nicholas Sayre gets taken over by the Destroyer and lots of bad things happen, and then he gets saved at the end, and then he goes home. But yeah, I quite like the setup. It's a very simple setup. I think I quite enjoy that about when an author who's written quite lengthy books is given the constraints of a novella and then executes it well.
Yeah, I mean, so the preface to this that I've read, because I read the same hard copy as Em, because it is Em's hard copy.
So in Across the Wall, the collection, yeah.
He writes that it started out as this kind of tiny fragment of an idea, and then he worked on it on and off for ages because it wasn't he didn't have a deadline to anyone to write this, and it sort of it was intended to be a short story and then grew into novella. So I don't think he intentionally put those constraints on himself, but I agree that it's really nice to read short form content from somebody who also is such a good novelist.
And the thing is, I mean, the thing about Across the Wall is that it's, as a collection, it does reveal that he is a very good short-form fiction writer. I mean, there's some in there. Every time I bring it up, Mark's like, hey, except that one story. You're going to skip that one story, right? And I'm like, yes, I'm going to skip that one story. I'm not going to read the horrifying lightning thief situation again.
Ooh, I might read that, because I like messed up and horrifying.
It's not a bad story, it's not badly written, but it is oh, hey, triggery all over the place.
Okay. I might come and ask you about specifically if it's okay.
Yeah,
because we're recording this. I have no idea what order the episodes are going to come out in. The week after having recorded with some other guests some horror stuff.
It should come out afterwards.
We ended up deciding that the book isn't actually really horror, but and
see, it's interesting because I was going to say this one's an interesting one to think about genre with. Because
there are definitely horror elements,
and
definitely.
I think because of it's also got the country house murder mystery. I've written in my notes country house monster mystery.
I like that
set up. So it's in some ways it's a very familiar setting. A familiar setting that is familiar because of genre books that are set in a real world historical thing. So it's. The time of Bertie Wooster and everything was a real thing that happened. So I feel like the fantastical elements, I think it lends itself, it's much more of a horror thing in some ways, because it is a more realistic setting that we feel that is more familiar and grounded to us.
And we've brought this fantasy monster into it, and what does it do to those surroundings, as well as the people in the story, but it breaks that normalcy, which is horrifying.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the setting of these books quite interesting to start with. The fact that there is basically half of this world which is, quote, based off England esque characters born in school, that kind of thing, which are quite relatable. And then you have a physical wall, and the other side is magic fantasy land.
I tell you what, one of the things I noticed on a reread of this one is because they go to the wall at the end, and something that I think is discussed in the earlier books, that that the weather's different and the dates, the calendars don't match up and all of that. But there's a bit where they're talking about the fact that the actual moon is being cut off. Nick can only see a slice of the moon, the moon's setting on one side, but it's just not there on the other side. And it's snowing on the other side, but it's
so creepy.
Normal weather on the other, and that's done very, very well. But sorry, Lottie, I cut you off.
No. I think that is kind of the point I was going to make, because it's a very simple idea for. I mean, I think I mentioned this when we did the Sabriel episode. I read this in primary school, probably a bit too young, a lot of it to go over my head. But in terms of fantasy books, it was quite a simple concept to grasp. You physically go across the wall, magic over the wall, magic not this side of the wall. And then the more you think about it as you are an adult, you think, yeah, but what about the moon? What about this? What about that? And it becomes a much creepier aspect, I think, because as a child you kind of go wall, boom, line, magic, no magic, job done. Whereas as an adult you think, yeah, but what about the weather? I don't know, maybe that's just me.
No, I
definitely think that's
and especially taking this free magic creature from the magical side, bringing it into the non-magical side, and then you see how the people from the non-magical side are interacting with it. Because the only time we've seen the non-magical side interact with these, I guess, anything from the Old Kingdom side would be in Sabriel, when the dead go to her school, and they're still quite prepared at the school to deal with that onslaught.
Yeah. And they're working with the Crossing Point Scouts, and I think there's definitely a couple of people in Abhorsen on the Ancelstier side who are very much they were not prepared for zombies, but they're still doing their best.
Yeah.
But
one thing I love about this, the sort of beginning of this book is Nick goes to this house that's basically the front for MI6 or whatever, magical MI6, and he gets sort of interrogated by these people who, they don't believe that he's in the magic of the Old Kingdom, and it's this nice callback to when he himself was like that.
Yes,
in the beginning of Sabriel.
I think that's what makes him a really interesting protagonist for this setup specifically. Is because he's come. We know him as the guy that was oh, haha, silly peasant superstition. Obviously, magic isn't real. And now he's come into this situation where everybody else thinks like that.
Having done the hero's journey and been forever changed.
And particularly been in because he's very much on in a transitional point with that, in that he's been forever changed, but he doesn't fully, he doesn't know still.
He knows he's been changed, but he hasn't yet sort of completed the transformation.
Yeah, or it's almost he's not in the know, maybe is a better way of phrasing it. He doesn't know what it means, and he doesn't have the our previous protagonists have this kind of built up, we know their education, we know why they're able to fight Stilken, or why they know how to use the bells, or, you know, and they have all these relevant skill sets. And he's very much set on the journey to become one of these people, but he's not there yet. And he's got just enough knowledge to be dangerous-ish. But...
to himself as well as others. One of the things I loved is this bit towards the end where basically this creature gets set loose, in part because it drank his blood, and his blood is like extra special and weird and messed up because of the events of the previous books. And he chases it all the way to the wall because it's trying to get over the wall as it's killing vast swathes of people. And by the time he gets there, he's sort of like infused with all sorts of magic, and he's and the people who are towards the wall, who are more used to this kind of nonsense, look at him and go and assume that he's like help. They assume he's reinforcements, and they go, "Oh, about time one of your lot got here." Yeah, and it's like, okay, this is who he's growing into.
Yeah,
But yeah, this bit in the beginning where he goes and gets interrogated, and it's this kind of chilling moment where you realise he's got no allies here. The people that he's talking to aren't going to believe him about any of the things that he's experienced.
It's a very different kind of horror, but it is still horror, isn't it?
Oh,
knowing something and not being believed, I think, is like a foundational horror thing.
I think it's part of the Eldritch horror, right? Is that you've seen something that you can't communicate.
Yeah,
but I'm thinking about like things like Stranger Things, which I think is maybe the closest I've come to what, you know, actual horror in recent years. But like so much of the first season relies on there's so much human horror in the fact that Joyce Byers knows that something supernatural is. She knows that her kid's not dead, or she knows that there's something that she's not being told, and absolutely everybody that is just like, oh no, it's just Joyce Byers, she's mad. And I think you get a little bit of that here with Nick's fragile and traumatized now. He doesn't know what he's seen. We can't trust him necessarily, you know?
Yeah.
I think especially with the description of the monster, like it's an amalgamation of different creatures that it... And the thing that sticks in my brain is the way that Nick describes how it runs. And like it runs, but it's like triple jointed legs.
Oh yeah, that's fucking horrifying.
And it's just running across to this maid that's like pegged it because she's terrified. And you know, as the reader, she's going to die. Nick knows she's going to die, but you can't do anything about it. And I think actually the comparison to Stranger Things does hit the nail on the head, because in series 1, not only does nobody believe Joyce, but it is also a very hidden monster.
Yeah.
Which I think is very similar for when he's chasing this creature. You see the destruction that it causes less than actually dealing with the creature.
Yes. Yeah.
Until the end.
Yeah, that's true. He's very much like he's following the trail of victims almost.
Oh yeah, no, I would say almost. I mean, like literally, yeah. Like he happens to also know where it's going, but even if he didn't, he could just follow the blood.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's horrifying, and he spends a lot of this book feeling quite powerless, either because he's up against institutions and people with institutional power. Yeah. So there's this bit where he is being interrogated sort of alongside this guy also from the Old Kingdom, who is completely not taken seriously by the people in power, and they're basically there to, I think they're there to exploit him.
And they basically say at one point he's not even a person, because he doesn't have papers to be in Ancelstia.
They say something along those lines, like, we can do whatever we want to him, and Nick is horrified. And the guy that says that is sort of forced to backtrack a little bit, but you can tell he's only backtracking to not because he actually, like, he said the quiet part out loud.
He's backtracking because Nick has some form of political privilege, and because of who his family is, and he's not willing to rock the boat tremendously at that point.
It's you've got all these, so there's this sort of institutional power that's like this other person is completely like up against as well, and then you also have the actual physical power of the creature that's just like you can't fight it. The only thing that they even at the end, the only thing is that Lirael ends up being able to do is sort of return it to the earth for a while.
Guys, before we jump into comparisons with other books we read, we haven't done a terrible summary.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah.
What are your terrible summaries for this book? I feel now it would make more context as we have slightly discussed the plot.
I have government spooks in murder basement up to no good. Shocked upper class twit discovers.
Ooh, I don't know. I don't know if I have a terrible summary.
I put magic creature goes on rampage after being kept locked up. Lyriel saves the day. Brackets as always.
Yeah. Something about the proper care and feeding of rules or whatever it is.
Yeah. Why don't you drink some magic blood about it and then maybe you'll calm down?
Yeah.
The other one I have is from Dorance's perspective. It is the semi-erotic servitude to blood-drinking free magic monster that lives in my basement. A great idea, says local eccentric. Because he is, like, mad creepy about this. He's like, I must serve her. She's the most beautiful thing. I can't believe my father sent her away. I must serve. And you're like, okay.
And everyone's
calm
just
down
giving a
a little.
side-eye, like, you know that side-eye gif where you're just like, yeah, sure, Dan.
You're just like, anyway, moving this conversation swiftly along.
Like, yeah, I guess, how did you find this? Yeah, I guess in comparisons to other, like, country house murder mysteries, Roaring Twenties books that we've read, yeah, I definitely think there's threads of, like, yeah, Jeeves and Wooster, where, you know, Nicholas Sayre is quite a privileged guy, that the setup in the house where they're having dinner.
The guy that he steals the motorbike from is very much a Jeeves and Wooster character.
Oh, yes.
The guy who's just like, oh man, I recognise you. You're good at cricket. Of course you can take my motorbike and you'll definitely bring it back to me. And he's called like something like St. John Wooten or something. And you're like, yeah, this is a Bertie Wooster character.
But it's also a class thing, right? In that Nick can get away with that because he belongs to that class, and to the kind of people who know each other from cricket. And of course he's a good chap. Of course he'll return my motorcycle to me.
I was going to say that was a thing that was very striking to me about this book on this reread, actually, was that Nick's superpower, both his superpower and kind of, in some ways, what used to be his fatal flaw, really, is that he's an upper class twit. Like, he's weaponizing that. He's using that public school self-confidence. Even though he doesn't necessarily have that many more facts than anyone else in the room.
Yes.
He is taking charge, and he is going, okay, I don't know everything, but I know enough to at least try and keep these people safe. And I know enough to at least not, like, scare them about the fact that I actually can't kill this beast, and I don't know whether the fire will actually keep it out. And I don't actually know if the Abhorsen's coming. Like, and it's very... I thought that it was interesting, because I don't think you often see that in books necessarily, that is useful, you know?
I'll tell you what, the fiction that it reminds me of the most is actually in Sandman, with Dream captured in the basement of... Like, that's just the vibe of, like, you've got something locked up in your basement, and the thing you, like, you know, and there's all of these people with... It's about the right era, and it's like, oh, you're stealing cars or whatever, and, like, you know, I've read loads of fan fiction of, like, Hob breaks him out or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing that I was reminded of in terms of vibe, and I think that's partly also because all of those have an element of horror to them, because unspeakably powerful thing locked up in your basement is just a great horror trope.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think the sort of the part of it where this, like, an integral part of the horror is the fact that, like, well-respected people in society have caused this.
Yeah.
I like that very much as, like, a theme. You know, the fact that there's this guy who is the head of this sort of spy agency, essentially, who is, sort of semi-erotically in love with this weird monster that apparently has been visiting him in his dreams since he was a child because it was discovered by his father. And it's also creepy and, like, bizarre, and I really like that. I like that in my fiction. Yeah,
no, I think that element of it is done very, very well. The other thing that kind of strikes me about... I think it's about Jeeves and Wooster, and it's also, I'm primed for it by the foreword, because he does talk about Dorothy L. Sayre as being an influence. And I think I mentioned this in the Jeeves and Wooster episode, that Dorothy L. Sayre's main detective, Lord Peter Wimsey, the vibe is very much Bertie Wooster if Bertie Wooster's only pretending to be an idiot. And that's actually something we see Nick deliberately weaponize when he's trying both to get a message out and to save the life of the Old Kingdom guy, Malton. Is that he's pretending to be a goof, that, you know, it's totally plausible that he'd give Malton a message for his uncle. He's, like, stumbling and palming him a second note to get him to send a telegram. And he's trying his best to keep Moulton alive as well. He's spending as much time with him as possible. He's trying to walk him to the car. He's trying to make sure his uncle's going to expect him. But it's all couched in this very like, oh, I'm just a lovable upper-class twit who's being inconvenient for no reason. Don't mind me.
And I think one of the things that comes through, like, so this book made me absolutely love Nick as a character in a way that I don't think was possible in the Abhorsen trilogy, because you just don't get to see very much of him as a person rather than him as a pawn.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he's doing in those scenes with this guy, Multan, is just trying to reassure him, trying to be a person to him, like the only person in that situation who believes that he's a human being worth taking care of, whose life has value. Yeah. So the line I went and looked it up because I have the book right here about what the spy people think of that guy is like. Oh, he's illegally here. He doesn't have papers. He's just an old kingdom trader. We can do whatever we want to him. Yeah. And so it's not quite he's not a person textually, but that's absolutely what's being said.
And I've got to say that was interesting coming back to it, because I was thinking about this earlier today, and I think that these books and the Old Kingdom books in general were maybe my first encounter with like immigration as a political and a social issue. It was the first fiction I think I'd read that really flagged that. And like,
because you have it in the other books as well, with like all of the people with the blue bandanas. Yeah.
And the kind of the idea that people who are trying to whip up a frenzy against immigrants and against refugees are evil, and they always want to treat those people as just as disposable meat. I think, I don't think, like, I mean, obviously we were quite young, I think, when we were all reading these books, but I don't think that had really like intruded on my consciousness in any way. I know, unspeakable privilege again in so it was really striking to me on this reread and on the last rereads we've done for the podcast that this was it's such a prominent thing, and that Garth Nix is taking such a firm stance about it, because I really don't feel like many people were talking about that, certainly not in kids fiction when we were growing up.
Yeah, I think that's something we discussed previously about, like, returning to this world and kind of how unique it is in the sense of it is a young adult fiction. I guess it could be probably argued potentially older than the age that at least I read it, and I think you guys also read it at quite young. But it's like these topics that are it's in that young, and I think it's also kind of back to the point of we were talking about in Alana as well. Like, these young adult fiction and fantasy has its place to get these points across to young kids in the literature that they are reading, and it's be important.
And it feels very naturalistic and part of the setup. I guess maybe because 20s country house murder mystery stuff is always going to be somewhat in conversation with the various axes of privilege and oppression that like converge to create that situation in the first place.
I mean, it's another great example of like fantasy being used as a way to talk about social issues in the real world, right? Like, you can sort of draw themes out much more clearly when you are in control of the world and who sees it. I really liked that was like that's such a strong theme throughout all of these books.
And I think that's another thing I appreciated about this one. I think that was done quite well was like everybody that actually helps Nick, with the exception of Motorbike Guy, is like they're all working people pretty much.
Yes,
you've got the young lieutenant. You've got, like, all the servants, like, I think some of the upper class twits are helping once we get to the circle of on fire hay bales and making the daisy chains and stuff. But it's primarily the servants that are helping, and the servants that are making sure that things get done. And I really,
the only reason things gets resolved at all in the end is because Nick paid one of the servants of one of the fancy guests there to covertly go and send a telegram, and that guy went above and beyond to make sure that telegram got sent. I mean, to be fair, Nick paid him quite a lot of money to do it, but still, it's that's the only reason that things got resolved.
Which is another thing I think the the sort of your traditional country house murder mystery, maybe certainly of the actual golden era of detective fiction, doesn't really engage with the staff necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And this was very much like, no, they're the important ones, actually. I've got to say, I enjoyed I think the one of the most striking hero moments of this. And Garth Nix is very good at a striking hero moment for a nameless character that you never see again, like the woman who lays the message on Barhedron Hill, or the lighthouse guy in Abhorsen, or, but in this one, it's it's a servant girl in her too big apron. She's the last person that's like, she's close enough to the gap to fill it in. She's got this one taper and she's running for that gap, and she's just a kid, and she's just the image of her in the too big apron and everybody watching, and her still trying and falling and throwing it just in time, just really, really powerful, really striking. I really enjoyed that moment.
Yeah, no, it was incredible. Like, I teared up a little bit.
And it's very much that kind of the Garth Nix heroism of, I'm the only one here.
Yeah, like one light against the dark.
I'm small and fallible, and I'm probably going to die, but I'm still going to try, and it's going to be, it might just be a really little thing, but it's going to be worth having done, Yeah.
And like Nick refusing to just go, okay, like maybe we should just let the creature go. Maybe we should just let it go across the wall to where people are going to be more equipped to deal with it. And Nick is like, no, because it will kill more people on the way.
Yeah.
Like, yes, that might be the most efficient, sensible course of action, but I cannot countenance that. And that's that's what makes him a hero, right?
Yeah. It's the somebody ought to do something, and that someone is me. I'm the only someone here that's even vaguely equipped. I've got to do it. I do love that he's having that epiphany while he's like napping in a luggage rack on a train that he's broken into. This was a very pleasing image to me also.
But yes, all around, good book. Liked it very much. I don't necessarily have that much to say, just because I just enjoyed it start to end. And I thought, it is quite short. But I was also surprised at how much I ended up liking Nick by the end, or even by like only a third of the way through, because he doesn't get a lot of characterization in the original trilogy of
like
books.
A lot of what he gets is obnoxious. It's like recovering Stembro dealing with demonic possession sort of thing. He's not very likable.
Yeah, exactly. He's not a very likable character, but it's a great character arc, and so I actually enjoy that he's being rehabilitated in this book. It's like, okay, no, he did what he took from that experience was exactly what he should have taken from that experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I quite like it as a setup to sort of the next generation of these books, in that we were talked a little about him kind of getting to the Crossing Point Scouts and them assuming that he's there to help, that he's one of the... I think he gets to the army, not the scouts, because the scouts are specifically the ones that can actually do magic.
I think they think he's a scout.
Yeah. And they think he's there to help.
I mean, he is, but he's not as capable as they think he is.
Yeah, oh, definitely. But yeah, one of the things I really liked about this book was how it set up just how weird his specific case is.
Yes, he is unique.
All of the magic stuff about Nick is very, like, he's breaking the rules as we already know them, in that... Like,
oh, I loved the moment where one of the charter majors that's there is trying to slow him down because they don't know who he is, what he's doing there, whatever. And they fire full blast a spell of like immobilization and incapacitation towards him, and it just powers him up. It's like it gives him 30 hit points.
Like it washes off him and he's glowing now.
Yeah. And they're all just like, okay, this is above my pay grade. And I mean, that's the reason that the monster is revived by drinking his blood, is because his blood also has free magic in it because of his experiences in the last few books.
But it's also, it both revives it and is poisoning it. It's like too strong for it because it's like really powerful free magic. See, that was the kind of the aspect that was really interesting to me, was the like, he's got free magic in his blood, but it's wrong. It's not quite, it's not what anybody expected. It's just not quite right. And technically he is baptized by the charter and he has the potential to be a charter mage. And some charter healing kind of works on him, but also some spells just wash off him. And
like Lyriel is able to heal him at the end.
Yeah. And he gets a power up from people trying to incapacitate him. And none of this is like stuff we've seen before. And I mean, again, I was talking to Mark about this earlier, I really like the idea of a next gen sort of series in this universe that really digs in on Nick, Lyrael, and Sam being weird as overpowered things that nobody's ever seen before. Because like Lyrael's like the first remembrancer in however long. There's never been a person wool maker, as far as we know, since like the 7. And and then Nick's out here with this weird, like, I'm semi-immune to charter magic,
and, like,
but also
he's
not.
nobody in terms of, like, the whole, you know, we sort of talked about this in the other episodes,
the
but the whole, like,
stuff.
bloodline stuff. You know, and it's like, oh, you know, can you be a mover and shaker in this world without bloodline? It's like, yes, you just have to undergo severe magical trauma first, and then you can be like Nick.
Yeah, you have to be resurrected by a magic dog that's actually a god from the dawn of time, and then maybe
then you get it. Yeah.
But only following a really specific demonic possession. You know, normal kid. But yeah, I really like the idea of that trio as being like these overpowered, extreme weirdos that everybody is looking at like, the f*** are they doing?
How did you do that? That's not allowed.
What is going on? Yeah, that's illegal. Stop that.
I also think for Maximum Funny, they should be like weirdly in sync with each other. Like every time you see all 3 of them together, you're like, am I looking at one person or 3 people?
Yeah,
like one person in 3 people's bodies. Just because I think that's an extra like creepy factor that, I don't know, that'll be funny.
Yeah, no, I really like that as an idea. Like, yeah, just terrible trio shenanigans.
Yeah.
I also there's a couple of things about Nick's arc here that I'm thinking about monsters, and I'm thinking about queerness, and I'm thinking about having to flee to a magical kingdom to find yourself. Just the fact that he's not quite right in so many directions because of what he's gone through. And nobody's quite seeing him right. And
except, I want to say, Lyrael. Right, and other people across the wall. So there's this stuff about he really wants to be able to talk to Lyrael again, and they're shown to be like they have he really wants to talk to her again. He keeps the letter from her like particularly safe, you know. And you can read that as a romance. I don't know if later books it is explicitly a romance, but I also really love the idea of it as like, because she's pretty ace, like that's like, I like the idea that it's just like queer affinity.
Yes.
That he's just like, oh, here's someone who is like also weird and fucked up like me in all the obvious ways, but also something else intangible there.
And she's coming at magic and being an Abhorsen and all of that at a very slantwise angle as well.
Yeah.
Because she didn't come to it in the traditional way for her people, and she didn't come to it in the traditional way for an Abhorsen. And she taught herself a lot of it. And her magic doesn't work like anybody else's. And this is true of Sameth as well. And like, your magic not working like everybody else's as a metaphor for queerness is extremely tasty, and I'm into it. Another thing I was thinking about earlier was I think there could be a lot of mileage in a reading of Nick isn't into Lyrael so much as he wants to be Lyrael, and maybe is also in an egg of some description. There is maybe trans and gender things happening there. Actually,
I could see it.
And she's life goals, not wife goals.
Yeah, or at least like, I really like the idea of them just being like weird friends that nobody knows quite what's going on with any of them.
Yeah, like, what's their deal?
Yeah.
What's happening there? We don't know. They don't know. It's great. We love that. We love that for them.
Yeah.
Like, they have something, and they finish each other's sentences, but it doesn't have to be like, you know, they get to make up their own rules. And like, just as they kind of have to when it comes to magic. I really like that idea.
And it vibes as well quite well with like Lyrael's, one of the bits of Lyrael's character that I personally am most fond of. And I think that the whole she's found her bio family, so now everything will be fine nonsense didn't really grab me, I've got to say. But she made her own friends. You know, and her own friends literally are as off kilter and weird. Like, I feel like being friends with Nick is and having that like interesting, difficult to define.
It's a very satisfying arc, like character beat.
Yeah, it's not we don't have a traditional like dynamic to fit a lot of her relationships into, and like let her and Nick and Sameth and Nick all be in that zone together. Like, I think that's got a lot of, potential to it.
I'll co-sign that. Yeah.
Cheers, bro. I'll drink to that.
Exactly.
I have a question. Do you think Gothmog would have killed the creature before it left the house?
I mean, it's in her house, of course. Like, nothing else is allowed to live in her house unless it feeds her.
See, she did a really weird thing the other day that I've never seen her do before, where she was asleep on my bed, and then she suddenly, her whole body stayed in like a flat circle at the bottom of my bed, but her head like periscoped up, and she was doing this like frantic sniffing thing. And then she was inspecting my whole room for whatever it was that she'd smelled. I feel like that is how she'd react if an eldritch monster woke up in our basement. Yeah. I feel like that's the warning sign, as the periscope head, frantic sniffing, trying to climb my window for some reason. Listen, she's a weirdo. We love her, but what is going on in her tiny head?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I think cats as eldritch monster warning signals. Yeah.
I mean, are there enough questions to a mansplain and manipulate male wife, do we think?
I think we can give it a go.
Well, we've definitely had a mansplain, because the science guy, the tweedy former rugby science man is all like...
100% mansplain. He's like, oh yeah, this is how science can explain this. And it's like, Nick is like, no, it can't. You're an idiot.
I literally tried that and I nearly died. I nearly died and got possessed by like a horrible radioactive orb that nearly killed all life on Earth.
Been there, done that, got the trauma. Yeah.
So I think he's definitely mansplain. I feel like there are a couple of different attempts at manipulate in this. And like Nick tries to manipulate a bunch of people into like letting Malthun go and not realizing that that's what he's up to. And a lot of people try to manipulate Nick into like doing spy or...
I mean, I would put Dorrance up there with manipulate, because he has been doing this. He's been doing everything he's ever been doing his whole life in an attempt to free this eldritch creature and get her beyond the wall.
Yeah.
Like, he sort of, his entire career as having inherited the spy agency. It's not really clear if that's just like, it's just a political dynasty thing, or if it's actually
it's kind
a
of
hereditary
odd,
thing that goes along with the stately home.
Because we know that they do have hereditary government positions, because there's a separate one that's mentioned.
Yeah, there's the arbiter. Nick's
get
cousin.
A passport across the wall.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he's got this like multiple covers going on, in that like he's pretending to be this like eccentric weirdo who keeps causing like dramatic problems in the capital by like giving students free booze, or
and that's a cover for him being the head of the spy agency, which is in turn a cover for him being an insane person who wants to buddy up with this eldritch creature.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that was the other thing that I enjoyed this time, was actually parallels between the creature and Nick, in that they both want to get to the Old Kingdom. Neither of them should be where they are, or should be capable of the things that they're capable of. Like, it shouldn't be awake that far from the wall, but it very much is, even before it gets Nick's blood. And they both just want to go home.
Yes.
And the fact that the daisy chain just is, like, allows them to talk to each other, it's like a parlay thing. I don't know, very tasty to me. Sorry, we've gotten off track.
I think Dorrance for manipulate.
But, okay, I hear you and I agree with you, but consider Dorrance for male wife. He would like to wife that creature so hard.
Oh no, okay, thanks for my daily dose of psychic damage. Yeah, no, I agree.
He very much
hate it, but
he wants to be the monster's male wife. He wants to, yeah. That's
sorry, Rowan, for my laughter there. You're going to probably have to balance the levels on that one. Yeah, no,
I'm sorry.
You're right,
I had to say it. The people deserve to know.
Yeah. We'll make up for it with this episode probably being shorter than normal.
I mean, it is a novella. I think that's only fair.
Yeah. It is a shorter.
Gaslight, gatekeep, but girl boss. I think the monster is all three of them, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Easy.
I don't know exactly how she's gatekeeping, but I'm willing to give it to her on trust.
Yeah. I do like this question. What would Jeeves do?
He would spirit Bertie away, I feel.
He would fight the monster with an umbrella and then get Bertie out.
What I really want in a Jeeves is here version of this is that that annoying kid that keeps fixing all the bets is there too. And like, Bertie barely notices that there's a monster, because he's too busy with the machinations of this horrible kid that keeps fixing the bets. And like the whole time he's in that fire circle, he's like, where's the annoying child? This is gonna totally muck up whichever bets. I bet I've lost all my money now. Like, I didn't bet on an eldritch monster drinking all my friends' blood before cocktails started. Like,
like, is this part of a universe where they're dealing with eldritch stuff on the regular? Like, this is just a normal Tuesday evening for Bertie. Like, Jeeves gets him out of scrapes all the time.
He's the martini guy at Jurassic Park.
I want, like, the Lovecraftian Jeeves and Wooster universe now.
Yeah.
Where it's like a cross between the Laundry Files. It's like the Laundry Files, but Jeeves and Wooster.
Yeah. I'd be so down with that.
Oh, we should read some Laundry Files.
We'll add it to the long
it might be
list.
when we end up doing on the horror stream of this podcast, but yeah.
Yeah, the horror bonuses.
I don't know what Jeeves would do if he was in this story, but I want to read it. Somebody needs to write that.
Does the fanfic exist? Email us.
Thing is, I think if Jeeves was here, Jeeves would be the guy that Nick was like, hey, can you get this message out?
That's true. He would have taken the chance to get him and Bertie away. Yeah.
Because that's why he goes to that specific servant, right? Because that servant's the guy that you go to for things. It's specifically like he's got away with boot polish or something. But like he is a servant above the norm of servants. And I feel like if in any house that Jeeves is in...
a high quality valet.
That's Jeeves. Although I also think Jeeves probably is actually very good at flower crowns. I feel like that is another place in this story where he would shine.
This is true. I think he would be... I mean, he would have made the flower crown in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually got one the whole time. It's like, Nick is like, quick, start braiding daisies together. And Jeeves is like, oh, here's something I prepared earlier.
Yep.
I do feel like this is a good story to get an F-bomb into, potentially. Before we talk cat rating. Does anybody have any strong opinions about where an F-bomb would go in this?
I think when he's climbing out of the I can't think what it's called. The thing that takes
the luggage
food.
rack?
No. When he's in that
The dumbwaiter?
Dumbwaiter, that's it. I was thinking of Lazy Susan, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's like the
Different household appliance.
Someone sitting there slowly turning while the monster
Yeah, he's just on the dumbwaiter and he just falls out. And you're like, oh.
Like any moment where he remembers he's not wearing shoes. Like he's been running across half of Anselstia and he's just not wearing shoes.
Yep. I feel like, or alternately, when the guy is mansplaining to him how he's an idiot, he's just like, "Are you fucking stupid?"
Yeah.
Except at that point, he's still trying to play dumb, and
he is trying to pretend to be stupid at that point.
Yeah, he's trying to get away without having to actually answer any questions. He doesn't realise how bad anything is. Yeah. So it doesn't quite make sense.
I mean, I think it's one of those words where you've got many different uses you can put it in many different places. Yeah. I kind of look also that when his uncle gives him the ultimatum of like, oh, you go and do this and I'll give you the things. Oh, like, oh,
I feel like when he finds Dorance's body, he's like, oh, you stupid f***er. I feel like that is also inappropriate.
I think we've almost exhausted every single like word type that we can use for the F word.
How many ways can we put an F-bomb in this? How shall I F-bomb? Let me count the ways.
Somebody says to Dorrance, she isn't going to f*** you.
I'm sorry, bro, she ain't going to f*** you. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. What a horrible way to go as well. What a hell of a way to die.
Fucking Spike Club hands.
Anyway, incredible. Listen,
sorry,
it takes all sorts.
I put the giggles. I feel so sorry for Ro having trying to edit this. I'm like my little audio thing, dear listeners. I'm looking at it and it's just going loud, soft as I'm giggling.
Yep.
Oh dear. Anyway, guys, what would our darling Dear Gothmog?
I think she'd be quite into
So
this.
there's not an actual cat.
That's true.
There is murder. There is subterfuge.
There is a monster breaking out of a box, which I think is something that cats can get behind. A stabby monster.
Although she doesn't actually break out of the box, does she? She is removed from the box for blood times.
That's true. Although, actually, I'm thinking of this in terms of, like, just generally cats and the whole Schrodinger's cat isn't alive or dead, it's fucking pissed.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, that's... Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the series that gives us cats that are secretly magical creatures.
Oh, can I just say, I love the throwaway line in Lyriel's letter, or maybe it's Samus, that they're building a fishing hut on the Rattlin.
Yeah,
and because
Samus.
that's for Mogget. Like, we know that's for Mogget from the conversation in Abhorsen. I just love that little callback.
Yeah, it's so cute. So, like, subtextually, there are cats here.
Like, Eldritch horrors are, I think, cats get behind as a rule. And Gothmog herself is, upon occasion, an Eldritch horror.
This is true, yeah.
There are shenanigans and backstabbing, although they are more horror shenanigans.
Yeah, they're not fun necessarily, but I feel like it still counts.
Yeah. Also, a lot of people are interpreting it. Whenever they see Nick do something crazy, they're like, student prank, sir.
Yeah, that's true. Well, because the guy, Dorrance, has this reputation for being a prankster.
Yeah.
So it's like, whenever he's like, oh, it's something to do with Dorrance, they're just like, oh, okay, I don't have to care about this. I don't have to think too hard about what's going on here because it's stupid. Yeah. I know it will be stupid. I want to say a 7.
Oh, yeah?
What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sitting 7. Around there, 6 or 7, I think.
Yeah.
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 It's not an incredible cat book. It's pretty good.
It's not temeraire, but it's a solid.
I'm going to say as well, the whole pet eating something they shouldn't and then regretting it and then going back and trying to eat it again.
Yeah.
Feels very cat-like. Like, I have been powered up by the spider plants I've eaten, but also I'm very, very sick now.
Yes.
It's a very
Gothmog is at her most eldritch when she wakes me up at like 6 a.m. with the sounds of her about to throw up a hairball.
Yes.
So I feel like this is thematically also on point.
So what do we think, 6 or 7?
I
split the difference, 6.5.
Yeah, 6.5. Let's go 6.5. Have you guys read anything else since our last recording?
No. Oh, I've been such a disaster. I have not read anything.
I've read one book.
Oh yeah.
I read The Poppy War finally when I went on my long weekend away, and I put it on my Bookstagram, but I wasn't expecting. I just thought I got it on the Kindle ages ago on my app, and I thought, I'll just read it because I've had it recommended to me a few times. I genuinely could not stop reading it.
Excellent. It was
really, really I think I need to reread it because I speed read it because I wanted to find out what happened. If you want like morally grey characters who make sort of decisions where you go, is that the best decision? Maybe not, but sure. I thought it was a good read. I
tell you what happened to me book related recently, which was that in the space of about a week and a half, 3 separate people recommended to me This Is How You Lose the Time War, which we have. It's been on our list to do for the podcast for ages. I know Em has read it and loved it, but it was very funny to me to have that coincidence, and also because you look like you're someone who would enjoy this book. Like, that specific book is absolutely the vibe that I would like to cultivate. Yeah. So I was quite pleased.
I have actually been reading. Shockingly, it's been so long, and yet I have read things that aren't just going straight into my sad Tim Drake hours bookmark folder on AO3.
AO3 was down, so
oh god, that was terrible. There were 2 whole days there where I was just sitting there like, I have to do things. What do I normally do when I'm not reading fanfic?
This is dating when we recorded this because the AO3 outage being recent.
Yeah. But yeah, I read, so prompted by our Alana episode, I read the rest of The Song of the Lioness, and then I am most of the way through the quartet after that, the Immortals Quartet, and enjoying it immensely. I bought the whole thing for myself as a late birthday present because my sister stole all of our copies.
Oh no.
No, they're probably hers, really. Maybe. Doesn't matter. It's fine. I have my own now. It's all good. I'm glad they're reprinting them. But I also want to shout out to Hen Fever by Olivia Waite, who is the one that wrote Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics and Care and Feeding of Waspish Widows, which I really enjoyed. And Hen Fever was incredible. I enjoyed it immensely. So if you want some good old historical sapphic romance that also features competitions for the best hens, things I didn't know existed. It's like, hey, do you want to deal with the found family dealing with the traumas of the Crimean War while also people get really, really upset about a competition for hens?
Is it like cat breeding? shows?
Yeah.
Is it that kind of thing? Yeah.
It's
like
crust for
really,
head.
really
Or like
intense.
Mouse Fanciers or something.
Yes, yeah. But it's very good. It's a very good book. I enjoyed it immensely.
Oh, that's good. I'm quite excited about our next book that we're going to read in the podcast, because we're going to do Emma by Jane Austen, which I think we're working our way through all the Austen books.
After this, we're only going to have like one of the.
I think it's just Mansfield
full
Park.
ones left.
I think it's just Mansfield Park.
It's an excuse to rewatch the 2020 Emma film as well.
Which I'm very excited for because I enjoyed that immensely.
Yes, I haven't watched it, and I am very excited.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. It doesn't. There's a moment in the book that's like really like difficult to film, I want to say, or not like difficult to film, but it's certainly hard to read. And the film didn't pull any punches with it, which I appreciated.
The only thing I know about that film is because Bernadette Banner did a video in it on YouTube, and I know very little about historical costuming, and apparently she was like, it was very accurate historically on the costumes. I'm like, okay.
Having said I've not been reading, I've been reading a lot of like knitting patterns recently. That's what I've been up to. I've been on my knitting and yarn craft hyper focus this past couple of weeks.
Nice. And also, if, dear listeners, you've got to this point in the episode and you've listened thus far, please give us a like or a review on your podcast platform. It does mean the world to us. And please send your questions in for our Q&A, because then we will answer them in our Q&A. So yeah, please do send us emails and we'll add it to the list of questions that we have on our Word doc.
An entire episode of us doing the kind of rambling we've just been doing for the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, but answering your questions, dear listeners, and we want to know, like, just send us questions, please. But you can also find us on all of our social medias. Email us. All the links are below in the description, in the show notes, I guess. But yes, say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see